Angles and measurements, the most important tool for beginner artists. Hello everyone and welcome to the 6th lesson of the 2nd chapter of the first book of the Art Journey series. Angles and measurement tools are the essential toolkit for any beginner artists out there that want to copy what they see correctly. The tools are not made to actually copy the real measurement of an object in the real world, but to convert a 3D object into a 2D object drawn on canvas. For example, we use angles and measurements to copy a chair that is basically a meter wide into a sketchbook that is barely 10 centimeters wide. Now the actual chair is way bigger than the sketchbook obviously, but that's where the tools come to help converting the distances and the angles of the real object into a simplified 2D drawing. But before we dive into this method, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment down below. The angles and measurements tool are your first step into focused observation of the real world and converting a 3D object into a 2D drawing. In previous lessons, we learned how to draw upside down, focusing on the lines alone. Then we drew the contour of an object by observing it blindly, without focusing on how correct it is. After that, we drew the grid method to follow the lines. And finally, in the last lesson, we drew the negative shape to frame our object without drawing it itself. All these lessons are basically a training wheel for your ride into the art world. They are not meant to stay with you forever. Well, maybe just the negative space that should be still used afterward, but the rest are meant to get you to a place where you are comfortable enough to finally use the angles and measurements to draw without any outside help. These tools I'm about to show you is when you finally start drawing using only your observation skills and the eye-hand coordination technique. So the importance of these tools is that you finally start looking at the outside world as an artist and analyze any object in the world correctly and converting it into simplified geometry. Now these tools were made to mostly be used when you draw from real life using your pencil or brush as a measurement tool to pick up the dimension and the angles of an object in front of you. But we will use it in this video to help us draw from a photo reference. But still you can use all the technique I'm gonna talk about here to draw from nature and real life as well. Okay, now let's dig deeper and take each part of these tools by itself. Let's start first with the angles. The angles are the direction and the tilt of any surface you see on an object in relation to your 2D canvas Y and X axis. For example, in this box we see the side edge of the box is 90 degrees from the x-axis and 0 degrees from the y-axis, since it's a vertical line. The top and bottom lines are 0 degree to the x-axis and 90 degrees to the y-axis, since it's a horizontal line. Simple enough, but now let's look at this pyramid. Now the angle of the sides are in between 0 and 90 degrees, and this is where you need your observation skill to figure out the angle of this edge. Here we can divide the 90 degrees in half between the x and y axis to get the 45 degree angle. This way we can fine-tune the measurement into 45 degree range instead of 90, which will help our precision even more. Now by dividing it in half, we can see that the edge is between 45 and 90 degrees, but it's more toward the 90 degrees than the 45. So we can divide the space between the 45 and 90 degrees again and get the 67.5 degree. And here we can see that the edge is about 70 degree tilt just by observing it. Now we can do the same to the other side and find out the angle of that edge, which is about 55 degrees compared to the horizontal line, and then to the final edge, which is around 60 degrees. Now that we have all the vertical edges, you can do the same for the horizontal ones or just connect the point to get your pyramid. And this is how the angles would make our conversion of this pyramid to the canvas way more accurate. Now of course we won't be just drawing basic shapes. Things get much more complicated when we draw organic objects or mechanical objects that may have cylinders or ellipses or even more complicated shapes like a human face. And that's where the angles get more precise. We have two types of angles. One is macro angles and the other is micro angles. The macro angles are the long broad strokes that contain the whole object in very few lines. These are for framing your object so you don't draw it too big or too small. One of the most recurring mistakes I see beginner artists do is starting a drawing on a piece of paper and realizing halfway that they are already out of space. It's either too big for the page or completely skewed to the one side or the other. The macro angles will fix that by containing your object in an accurate frame from the beginning. They are used to draw the big picture by observing your object as a whole, without being bothered by the small little details in your object. If you do this correctly, you will end up with an accurate representation of your object frame converted into your 2D canvas. Once you are done with the overall shape of your object, you can now start with the micro angles. Now that you don't have to worry about your overall dimensions, you can break down these long strokes into smaller and even more accurate strokes by observing the smaller angles of your object. Now even with the micro angles, you still don't have to draw every single detail in your object just yet. These micro strokes are to frame the details in your object, but not to draw the actual outline just yet. Don't be bothered with smoothing curves or accurately drawing each gap in line. We are doing the same thing we did with the big strokes, just breaking it into smaller and smaller lines. Once we have all the micro angles drawn, we can now smooth it up and draw the inner details without worrying about wrong dimensions or angles. Let's look at a quick example here. I'm gonna use angles to draw the object here using macro and micro angles technique. We're gonna start first with the biggest overall shape of this object. This container can be anywhere between 3 and 6 size frame. We're gonna only look at where the object absolute edge is and draw a line between the points of that object. So we have one from the top to the bottom edge, and to draw this angle you can compare it to the vertical and horizontal line and the midpoint at 45 degrees. Now it's obviously a larger angle than the 45 degrees toward the vertical line, so it's about 20 degrees from the y-axis or 70 degrees from the x-axis. You can draw both axes very light on your canvas and then draw the actual line in between. And here we have one with the angles done. We do the same process for the rest. One from the top to the left, and one from the top to the ground, and one for the ground plane, and finally connecting the lines together. Here we have 5-sided frame that contain the whole object. Now whatever you draw, you can't get outside of this frame, which solves one of the issues with beginner drawing, of going too large or too small. After this we can do another macro phase angles before going to the micro ones to simplify it even more. After that you can move into the micro angles phase inside this container we just made. So let's lower the opacity on this layer and start a new layer segmenting the spaces between the lines we just made. So we draw a line from the top of the chimney to the main body using the same method as before, calculating the angle before committing to the lines. We draw another one from the body to the sphere, then from that to the bottom of the train pilot, and let's do another one from there to the wheels, and then all the way to the cabinet. We can now either move in with the details since we have the whole container of the object in rough lines, or we can go even deeper with another micro layer between these lines. It's up to you. But even with angles alone, you can contain the frame of your object, fixing your scaling and dimension issues all at once. But all that work is for the exterior outline of the object. What about the interior lines? Well, here is where we need the second part of the toolkit for this video, the measurement tools. Artistic measurement is the most essential tool for all artists out there that are drawing from reference or interested in realism. Whenever you Google a picture of an artist, you will find a photo of an artist holding a pencil or a brush at arm length, measuring an object in front of them. Now these measurements using actual tools works well for life drawing with traditional mediums, but in the digital world things need to be tweaked a little bit. Just like the angles we saw before, this technique depends on the horizontal and vertical lines as well. But it's not limited to them only. You can also use angled line, tangents, curved, triangulations, segmentation, and so on to get the required measurement that you seek. We're gonna go over all this in a bit, but we're gonna start with the basics first. Let's look at the train toy again. Let's say you want to draw the window in the cabinet in the back. We draw a line from the top of the window all the way to see where it hits. The windows start at the same point at the canopy of the cabinet. Now the lines I'm drawing here are not 0 and 90 degree horizontal and vertical lines. These are more of a vertical and horizontal perspective lines. The horizontal line I just drew is at an angle with the model in a 3D space. Now if that is too complicated at this point, you can still go back and draw a normal vertical and horizontal line that is aligned with your canvas and do the same thing. The results are the same. You will just have to get 4 lines for the corners of the window instead of 2, since they are not aligned in the forward position. Now let's continue by drawing another line for the bottom of the window, and it hit around the quarter of the box of the cabinet and go through almost the middle of the main cylinder of the train. The 2 vertical sides of the window hit the bottom of the box of the cabinet at a quarter from each side and go all the way to the wheels. Now these measurements frame the window for you to be able to copy it to your canvas. Now when you draw this rectangle, you won't go over the canopy from the top because you know that's the limit up there. And you won't go down lower than the middle of the cylinder or more than a quarter from the bottom of the box because that's where the frame is. And as for your sides, you have the limit of each side of the box. So you won't be able to make a mistake here even if you want to, because these lines of measurements limit the space that you can draw in. Now when I first started drawing and learning this method, it completely baffled me that this is what drawing is. I thought it was more of a free-form artistic expression rather than a mathematical calculation. You will probably think the same, but trust me, this is only what it feels like in the beginning. Those lines that we draw for measurements and angles should not be drawn physically on the paper. They should be drawn mentally in your head. Now if that is too hard to start with, by all means draw them on the paper, but in the long run these training wheels has to come off, and those calculations has to be done mentally. So does this mean this is how people draw? Always calculating angles and vertical and horizontal lines? Well yes, but actually no. This thing will become a second nature or a habit after practicing for a while. It's like driving. You won't be thinking about it when you do it for a while, but when you first learn to drive, you are thinking of so many things that the whole thing feels like a math test. Same with drawing. This is just the start, and after a while you will be doing all these calculations mentally in your subconscious mind without even thinking about it. So don't worry, it will get better. So let's continue with this and draw the bottom of the cylinder. The line of the bottom of the cylinder hits the cabinet inner box, the wheel third section, and the pilot third segment from the top. So you can copy that to our drawing. Next we have the inner circle of the face of the cylinder. Now drawing the cylinder in perspective is a whole lesson of its own, but for now we're just gonna try our best to copy it as it is and leave the perspective side of it for another lesson ahead. The absolute edge of the cylinder face hits the pilot corner from the bottom and a little bit away from the main chimney. Not exact edge of the chimney, but a little bit further away. We have the top and the right edge of the cylinder figured out by all the angles we did before. So now we can simply connect the points and get our cylinder. We can do the same for the back side of the cylinder as well, but this time we're gonna need both the vertical line of the back edge and the other horizontal line from the side of the cylinder. Again, this isn't a straight line, it's a perspective horizontal line that follows the perspective of the object. We take note of where the line hits and copy that to our canvas. Let's draw all these three wheels down there. We have the bottom of all of them done by angles, so let's figure out the top. The first two wheels are the same size, so we can draw a measurement line from the top of the forward face all the way to the right. It will hit the lower quarter of the pilot to the right, and from the left it will hit almost the center of the big wheel. Now let's frame the side of each wheel by drawing the vertical line. Some of these lines will hit the middle of other parts and some are hitting the corners. Measure each line you see on the reference to the drawing you made and you will frame each of these wheels in a rectangle of its own. All you have to do now is to draw a circle in that rectangle and you will have the front face of the wheel. The wheel is in perspective, so it's going toward a vanishing point to the right, which means the circle we drew is copied and moved in that way. But since this isn't a perspective lesson yet, let's do it in the same way we did the first one, and copy it toward a new rectangle. Now we can delete the hidden edges of the back side, and we connect the two circles together to get our wheel. We can move on to the rest of the drawing in the same way, figuring out the framing lines of each part of the interior, one by one, till we draw the whole thing accurately. Again, this will seem daunting at first, but it will always get better and smoother the more you do it. Before I go into more examples, let's talk about other ways you can measure the points in a reference than just a vertical and horizontal line. We're gonna include those lines as well, just so you have a full list of them in one place. By the way, before I start talking about this, I made a video before about drawing the head using these tools, among other things, called the freestyle method. You can find it on the top right corner if you want to check it out. I talk about drawing the head using all these measurements tool, negative space and more. But watch it after this video so you don't get things mixed up. This video is about drawing everything, and that one is mainly for the head, but using the same rules in general. Okay, now for the first one we have the vertical and horizontal lines. We already saw this in previous example, but as I mentioned, this can be straight vertical and horizontal lines or perspective adjacent, which can be considered angled line. It depends on what you are comfortable with. If you are just beginning to do this, go with the straight line first, then adapt as you get better at it. This line's purpose is to compare each point on your object with another one that you already drawn. For example, if you started from one point on your object, like the right eye for example, and want to move on to the next, these lines will compare the part you want to draw with the part you just drew. This way you don't go all over the place in a chaotic motion, but more compact and focused way like an artist. As I mentioned before, the eye of an artist is more focused when drawing, unlike someone who never drew before. And this is one of the ways that change the way you see things when drawing. Next tool we have the curves. The curves follow the same logic of the measurement lines, but more adapted to fit an organic object more. This is kind of an advanced tool, so you can try this after you master the basics. It's mainly creating new ways to measure your 3D reference to convert it into points on your 2D canvas. It can also be used for both exterior and interior lines. The way this works is by drawing a curved line from a point you want to draw to see what is this line interacting with as it moves through your object. And wherever this curve hits, it will frame this object or objects underneath it. Again, all this eventually should be done mentally, not on paper, but that just comes with practice. The third tool of measurement is the triangulation. Triangulation is unique since it can be used in two ways. The first way is by triangulating a space on your object and turning it into a small grid or a negative space that you can transfer into your drawing. Like you can connect any 3 points on your object and move it as a triangle instead of a complicated shape. Once you have it on your canvas, you can deal with the details in that frame, which would be easier than transforming the detailed line one by one without a frame. The second way you can use this as a measuring tool like the horizontal and vertical lines, but in 3 points instead of 2. See, when using a line you can compare 2 points on your object to each other, but here you can compare 3 points in relation to each other. So now you are imagining a triangle between these 3 points and transferring it to your canvas. This way you will cover more distance and more details in one go. But again, this is an advanced tool to use later after you master the basics. The final tool is segmentation. This tool is essential for measuring out proportions of things you want to draw. We use this a lot in drawing the human portrait or a figure. Segmentation is when you take any zone or area or part of your object and use it as a measurement unit for the rest of your object. For example, if we measure the head in total and segment it in half, we get the line for the eyes. Or segment the bottom half into 3/3 and we get the location of the nose and the opening of the mouth. But as with every tool, this can also be used in perspective. We can take the eye as a unit and duplicate it 5 times to get the width of the front of the head all the way to the ears. But the size of the segment will vary as it moves in perspective. So you can use this method in the beginning to make sure you are starting the right way, or you can use this tool at the end of your drawing to make sure your proportions are correct. This is a good technique to check after all the previous ones to make sure you didn't do things smaller or bigger than they are. It's like a fail-safe technique for all the previous ones. Remember, all these previous tools are not made to be used alone. You can always mix and match all these techniques together to make sure your drawing is accurate. This is the first step you take after you let go of the previous techniques like the grid or the upside down method, all except the negative shape technique of course, which can still be used along this method as another tool of measurement. So this is the first step toward you finally drawing just from pure observation skills. Alright, now that we know what angles and measurements are and what tools they contain, let's go on with the examples. And as always, I like to go from easy examples to hard ones, to make sure you are following along without any issues. Okay, in this first example, I'm gonna draw a simple still life with basic shapes. This time I'm not gonna go over every angle and measurements like I did before. I'm gonna demonstrate how things should look like with all the angles and measurements happening mentally and not on paper. This is the second step moving forward with these tools. So first, I start with the macro angles of the whole shape combined together just to frame my scene so I don't go overboard with the scale, either too big or too small. After that, I lower the opacity and start breaking these macro angles into micro angles, defining the shapes inside even more. While I'm doing this, I'm calculating each angle like I did before committing it to the paper. Now this is happening much faster than before, but that's only because I have done it before many times. As I always said, focus on accuracy first, speed will come later eventually. Also with micro angles, I'm measuring each line to its surrounding, either by lines or triangulation or segmentation. Sometimes you see me draw quick light lines then undo it, and other time I just do it mentally. But I'm not committing to drawing lines before I compare it to its surrounding. It's an informative stroke. Nothing here is left for guessing. Once I have the micro angles and the basic shapes of the scene, I can now add a new layer and start putting down the smooth, detailed line on top, based on the previous frame. Now I know I won't get the proportions wrong since I already stated the frame of each shape. Things may differ here and there, but the main shape will remain the same. With the detailing part, things get more dynamic. See, as I said, it's not a mathematical process all the time, just the first bit to nail things right. Afterward, you will be drawing freely, but inside the calculated frame you did earlier. Now I'm basically done with the image. All I'm doing now is adding some line weight to the object and cleaning up some lines. And here it is, done in 15 minutes, without any grid or flipping it upside down. Pure observation and eye to hand coordination. This is now 100% pure drawing skill, without any helping aids. Alright, let's crank up the difficulty a little bit and draw an organic cartoon shape. Alright, here we have a character with lots of curves and twists, but the idea is still the same. We start with the macro angles of the outline and then we modify it as we go along. Now this may be in real time, but I think you should go even slower than this when you first start. Make sure the angles you put down are as correct as possible. It's hard for me to slow down at this point since I can't go from automatic thinking back to manual, which is a great sign by the way, that once you get used to this, you no longer have to think about it as you are doing it. Okay, now I have the major angles down. I can now, without even needing to go micro, I can just start drawing right away. As we move forward with these examples, you're gonna see me doing less and less steps to show how things should eventually be after you practice it a lot. As I'm drawing the details, I'm still bound by the frame I made earlier, so there is a very slim chance to have any major mistakes here. Sometimes you see me doing some horizontal and vertical lines on the reference and on my canvas to see where these critical points of the form turn and twist. So this is not just angles but measurements as well. And it's not only horizontal and vertical lines as well, but also triangulation and segmentation as I go along. If you are drawing the details and realize there are some mistakes in the major frame, don't conform your details to the wrong frame. Always adjust the main frame based on your observation as you go on. And now the details are done. I can go around the drawing and add some line weight and fix some minor mistakes here and there. Alright, it's done. Now into the next example. Let's do a complicated mechanical shape. So we're gonna draw a car. Okay, with this I'm gonna go even quicker, merging many steps together and trying to finish this in 15 minutes. Now if I was drawing this for the first time, it would take me anywhere between an hour and 3 hours to finish correctly using this method. But eventually you should be able to do a quick sketch like this in 10 or 15 minutes. So I start with kind of a middle ground between the macro and micro angles to frame the whole car first. Then I go right into measurements and details. One of the major mistakes I made here were to make the middle part a bit longer than it is. And here is where the segmentation should have helped a lot at first. By segmenting the car into 4 parts would make the middle part in the right size. But it's okay, fixing this won't be hard. As long as you are working light, mistakes like this can be fixed as you draw. But if you wanna go by the rules, start slow and use segmentation first. Also, another tip is not to start right away with the small details. Try to finish the major features like the wheels, windows, and so on before going into the car handles and lights and the small fixtures. As I said before, trying to remember the rules is much harder when you moved on to breaking them on daily basis. Now that I realized the mistake, I cut out the middle part and shrink it a little bit while extending the back and the front of the car. Still working light, so all this is easy to do. And now I refill the spaces that has been cut and move on to the wheels. Another thing I noticed is the top half of the car is a bit high, so I cut it off and shrink it a bit. I treat this drawing as a dynamic entity. I have no connection to it emotionally, so cutting and stitching it is absolutely no problem. An issue that faces new artists is being too attached to their drawing, that fixing it seems like ruining it. It's 100% normal to feel that way when you first start, but you need to move on from that mindset right away. Drawings are dynamic. Keep cutting and pasting and stretching as you want and as you move along. The goal is to have a correct drawing, not a glass statue that can be touched. If you can't move on, the best thing to do is to do a whole painting for an hour and then not save it if you are doing it on Photoshop. I know it sounds horrible, but that was the only way my teacher made me get over that mindset. It was actually a 2-hour drawing I did on paper, and after I was done, he just tear it in the half and throw it in the bin and told me to start over. I almost hit the guy, I was so angry. But honestly, right now and then I felt relieved that I can actually let go of my drawing. Now I can draw for hours on Photoshop and forgot to save, and the Photoshop may crash and I just have to start over. So it doesn't bother me as it used to be when I first started. So always remember to let go of your drawings and don't be so attached to it. Drawing more is always a good thing. Okay, now I'm almost done. Again, I add some line weight to make it look pretty and finish it up. Oh, and the whole lightweight thing I keep mentioning is a whole new lesson coming soon, so don't worry about it just yet. Alright, for the final example, we have the most complex object in the world, a portrait. I decided to go with a side view here because it has way more angles and twists than the frontal portrait, so it will be more interesting. In this example, I'm using everything: macro angles, micro angles, horizontal lines, perspective lines, curves, triangulation, and segmentation, every single tool I talked about to get this right. So with that said, let's start with the angles while measuring and segmenting every detail. Even when I start with the first few angles, I'm still measuring these angles in comparison to the edge of the canvas, so I know where the lines would be. Along with the macro angles, I'm doing small micro angles where there should be more details. You can always mix the two together when needed. And here is some measuring for the jaw in comparison to the hair. Now I'm using some curves to frame the face by the hair and the jawline. I'm moving from one place to another before I get into any details. It's more important at this stage to get the proportions right before diving into the details just yet. The whole portrait took about 24 minutes. So for you, don't rush it, take 2 or 3 hours or more just to do it right. Now that I have the frame done, I can now move in with the black brush and start adding the details. You'll see right away I'm using the segmentation to get the eye line, the nose, the mouth, and the brow line correct. With portraits and human figure, segmentation is one of the most important tools to get the proportions right. Do it in the beginning and in the end to make sure you got things right. Here I'm using perspective verticals to get the angles correct. The angle of the nose bottom, for example, is almost 45 degrees on the perspective axis, but around 15 degrees on the camber axis. So you can use both axes if you want to be 100% sure of the correct angle. In this stage, draw light. There are gonna be a lot of corrections here. When I start going internally into the eye, all measurement tools are on deck to help with this. Now I'm measuring the corner of the eye and the eyebrow, to the hair, to the back of the head, to the nose, and to the jaw. All 4 directions to make sure it's not going wild on me. Always tame your lines by framing them into 4-sided box, otherwise they will be running wild and going all over the place. Now you can see me on the reference figuring out the angle of the ear based on the Canva axis. After that I go for the tip of the ear in the vertical lines compared to the hair, then the beginning of the ear. Continuous measuring as I go along. Now if I wasn't doing this for the video, I won't actually draw the lines, but I would be doing it mentally. You should do it on the reference for each point you put down if you want. The less you guess, the more accurate your drawing will be. Once you start filling in the gaps by yourself, your drawing gonna be all weird symbols and zero realism. Drawing the dress is mostly internal, so lots of measuring going on here. The hands are tricky to draw, but as long as you are following the angles and measuring it toward the body, you will have no problem here. Another segmentation check at the end. I thought the neck was too long, but my measuring proved me wrong. She does have a long neck, and my drawing is almost 100% identical, which made me really happy. But again, I can't go wrong with all this measuring I'm doing, and neither would you. And another final test for the facial features, making sure that my eyes are in the middle of the face, and the 3/3 of the facial features are correct. If you want to know more about the proportion of the face, I do have a whole series on how to draw the head which contain 11 different methods with a lots of examples and technique. You can check it on the right corner up there. Now that I have the proportions right, I duplicate the layer twice to get the darker line and go over the whole drawing with heavier line weight and correct any minor mistakes. And here it is, a portrait done in 24 minutes, using angles and measurements. And here are the 4 examples side by side. The angles and measurement technique is one of the most important and essential tools for any beginner and advanced artist has to have. As I said, this is your first step into training your eye-hand coordination and improving your observation skills. It's gonna take a long time for you to master it, but as long as you practice it, it will only get better from here. And this is it for this lesson, and it's time for your homework. As always, there is an easy mode and a hardcore mode, if you are up to it. For the easy homework, you can pick up 5 different subjects to draw. Start very simple with basic shapes, arranged in simple still life, like we did, and draw 3 different arrangements. Next, draw 3 different toys, like the train toy set we did, and then draw 2 different cartoon characters that aren't very complicated like anime or game characters, just simple ones for now. After that, draw 2 mechanical objects like a car or a machine or maybe a home appliance, and finally a portrait of your choice. using everything we talked about here. In total, you would be drawing 11 different examples, which is a good start but no mean enough to get the hang of this method. For the hard mode, we up the numbers into 10 still life, 10 toys, 5 cartoon characters, 5 mechanical objects, and 3 different portraits. It should be around 33 examples in total. I'm pretty sure your drawings will be a lot different by the end of these examples. And this is it for lesson 6 of the first book of the Art Journey series. It's the 5th exercise in a long list of exercises for beginners yet to come. I hope you enjoyed it and learned from it. It's a very important step in your journey, almost a milestone in your travel toward being an artist. So watch it and rewatch it again, but most importantly, apply it and practice it over and over again. Before I go, I'd like to thank my Patreons who donated to my channel. If you'd like to donate, please go to patreon.com/rainwalker. Thank you all for your generosity. I also like to send a shout out to the members of this channel who joined for almost 5 months now. So thank you for your great contributions. If you'd like to join, you can hit the join button underneath this video. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you want to see more art tutorials for beginners, paintings, and visual library series. Click the subscribe button underneath this video to stay tuned and click the notification bell to stay up to date with new videos. I'm still working on the third book video, by the way, and so far I have 60 hours of drawing on it alone. It's a long video, so I still need about a week or so. That's why I decided to sneak this in before I finished that one, since it doesn't take as long as the third or the second book series. The second book and the third book videos takes so long to finish. But I will be back on with the third book video right after this one, so hopefully it will be done by next week. But for now, if you want to see other videos for beginners, click right here. And if you want to check out how to draw the figure series, which has many methods like Andrew Loomis and Frank Riley, you can click on it over there. As for now, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.